Hello, hello, hello. This is Peter Winick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on our podcast today, Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Dana Shaw Arimoto. Dana is the founder and CEO of Phoenix Fifth. She's about to be an author. We'll talk about that in a little bit. She sits on a lot of advisory boards, Reboot Excel, Apollos, ShiftGig, Vindley, Link Systems, actually. She's a consultant. She's a coach. Dana and I have known each other for, it's about a year and a half now, maybe a little more, Dana.
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. Well, anyway, thanks. Say hello and thanks for joining me today.
Say hello. Just kidding. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk with you about this journey and share a little bit with your listeners.
Yeah. So let me sort of set this up. So this is a fun one for me because Dana and I started working together about a year and change ago. We did some strategy work and we sort of cracked the code on her platform, which is a key piece in the process. So it's this whole stop settling platform, and now we're a year or so later, and she's in the process of putting a book together around that. So why don't we start with maybe tell us what the process was to develop the stop settling platform and then all the fun that you're having figuring out how to publish a book.
Definitely the former is easier to explain than the latter. So thanks for the sequencing. So the platform itself literally was born out of this personal experience of work-life balance is a myth. And depending on how hard I'm running in the hamster wheel, which is how it felt most of my corporate career for 20 years, even my 4 years in nonprofit, which sort of became my body of work, inspiring this notion in the book, I felt like we were sort of taught or expected to have it all by being your all and doing it all.
We can't have it all the time.
I don't know how. If you do, then you write the book. So I hit my head pretty hard on the wall a bunch of times. And then I started piecing together lots of public domain stories. Think about Arianna Huffington hitting her head on the glass coffee table. Voila, she realizes it's not good to not sleep 4 hours a night, writes a book on sleep, proving scientifically we need 7 or 8 hours, most of us. And if not, you're not in performance enhancement, and ties it and correlates it to the way we show up in life, not just career. And if you think about it, even most recently, actually on the 30th, there was this amazing article highlighting the CMO from JP Morgan and Jeff Bezos, of course, of Amazon. And they talk about how they also don't believe in work-life balance, but more the trade for integration is the way to go. And that's, again, super validating with my purpose and mission and movement that we have got to stop settling. And we can't be walking through life unconsciously making these expected or supposed to or shoulds in how we operate our daily life, both at work and at home. And so I'm really encouraging people to get on with this movement to really make better choices and integrate the way they live their life.
Got it. So we can have it all, just not all at once.
Bingo.
Great. So I love how you frame it in terms of the purpose, the mission, and the movement. But now you've got your platform. So the next logical step for most is, okay, I'm going to put a book together on that. So you've been thinking a lot about the book. You've got, I think most of that content is in your head, right? It needs to come out. Let's talk a little bit about the process that you are in the midst of going through to decide the publishing route that's best for you, given your goals and objectives and time frame. So what has that process been like for you?
Yeah, it was sort of a lot of fits and starts in addition to the way the writing works. Like you said, Peter, you know me so well, getting it out of my head and onto paper, if you will, either, electronically or old school, which for me, it was both. It was, snippets of paper and backs of envelopes and in a notebook and a journal and on my laptop. So it was sort of a mess.
But I've got to give a public service announcement. For those of you under 30, you can Google paper. People used to apply ink to it, and that was how we wrote. Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled podcast.
So, yeah, it was really sort of, I don't know, a bit of a chaotic process for me for many, many years. And eventually what I realized was, like most things, I needed a system. And you were pretty validating in our first meeting when we were talking about both the concept and the platform, which I didn't realize was a platform. So thank you for that, because you really shed light. I appreciate that. And you had a moment where you called me the stop settling lady. And I thought, yes.
So the yes is important because when you're developing your platform, it's not temporary, right? So it's not a sweater that might be a little itchy and maybe you wear it now and again. It's got to feel really good. It's got to feel comfortable and you got to feel proud of it and it's got to be part of you. So I think the fact that when we hit on that together and the lights went off, I was like, you sort of looked at me and said, "Damn, yeah, that's me. I could do that. I want that."
Completely. And it was really helpful. And no more itchy sweaters. I've given those up. Yeah. So that was sort of a moment. And if you string the moments together, there were a bunch of milestones leading up to predicting how I would choose to get on the path to being an author. And so, flash forward, systemizing the way I was writing, what I was writing under the context of a one singular mission of let's get the world to join the movement and stop settling, in particular unconsciously. And in some cases, just to be interestingly a bit ironic, to also start settling, which you were instrumental in helping me think through. It's the push and pull of I want to do more in my career and less with my family. Well, that sounds horrible to most people when you think about it. For working moms or single moms, as I was for 10 years, the trade offs were necessary and in some cases based on things like joy and fulfillment. And, again, I'll just cite this JP Morgan CMO in her article in Business Insider. Her name is Kristen Lemkow. She talks about going to a kid's soccer game. And while the kid's sitting waiting to play and get out on the field, she'll do some email. No one looks at her like she has three heads. And the second he's on the field, she's full attention. So that's her minor example of integration. And for a lot of working parents, not just moms, but men and women, I think we can relate to that. And so, really fleshing out chapters that talk to men and women situationally and relatively across all the five key aspects of what I call now the settling spectrum.
Which is awesome. So let me ask you this. So we've got the content, you've got your framework. There's more work to be done on the book in terms of writing, but there's a map, there's a process, there's a guideline here. Tell us a little bit about some of the decisions that you've made in terms of getting an agent, not getting an agent, how to publish, where to publish, and sort of the learning curve and the joys of the publishing universe as we know it today.
Yes, you're not letting me avoid the latter. I tried. Did you notice that?
Yeah, twice, but we're not counting.
Peter is resilient and tenacious. Okay, so I was going to, with some pretty heavy connections, go through an author's agent, try to get traditional publishing, and get in advance and go for a bigger house and sort of eyes wide open, knowing I might lose a little bit of content or tone or my voice. But for some reason in the beginning, I thought reach was more important and I wanted to try to make a big splash. And then, thanks to you and some validation from some other people that are pretty well known in publishing, it became really clear that today's publishing house is not yesterday's publishing house. And what I would have to give up and also trade off, a la, you're on the hook for whatever big run of books you're going to print. If you don't sell those, or they don't sell those, or you mutually don't sell those, you're kind of on the hook to buy those books. It really started to heavily weight my pros and cons list on self publishing. And so I ended up choosing the self publishing route with a little bit of a twist.
Great. So let me just clarify one thing that you said. I think some people believe that publishing works like they read about how it worked, 15 years ago, where you get the advance and they do all the work and all this other stuff. You chose to self-publish to lower the risk, actually, one of the criteria of being at a big house, because the big house said to you, something to the extent of, okay, Dana, you have to guarantee us, whatever, 3,000 books at wholesale. So there's a financial hook to you. There's no advance. That's a negative advance, actually, if you do the math. And not only do you have to buy those books, but unless you want to keep them in your den or your garage, you're going to have to figure out how to sell them, or you're going to have to write us a check. That, in conjunction with the lack of control, the long timelines, et cetera, got you to reconsider your original thinking and say, you know what, self-publishing is a better direction for me. Control, financial, et cetera.
Spot on. And again, it's interesting how all of this is so metaphorical, but just like the stop settling spectrum, where sometimes I'm putting more time, energy, and getting more joy and fulfillment out of family time, sometimes it's more about vitality and self care and health and wellness. And sometimes it's more about career. And sometimes it's more about, community. And sometimes it's more about friends. Same thing here. And just icing on the cake, I have a really good friend who published her first book, and she had literally a garage full, top to bottom. And it was like a 2.5 car garage. So, not
Ouch.
something
That's
small,
a lot.
filled with books. And eventually she made the call to a distribution house who came and took all those books away and became her shipping agent. And I just thought, I cannot imagine the anxiety and agita of having a garage filled with books that I would have to somehow figure out the shipping and receiving or whatever it is. Like, that's so not
I
me.
love that you used your own framework on stop settling to help you make a very important decision, right? So that's interesting to me, right? That you're eating your own dog food, if you will.
Or drinking my own champagne, depending on the day. Some days dog food, some days Larry Ellison and his
Yeah.
champagne. So, yes, and it's a work in progress. And in the coaching world, we always say we teach what we most need to learn. And in the last 2 years, boy, have I found that to be true as I'm coaching leaders and executives. And a lot of our conversations have really influenced me. And, I sort of file them in my head as to, if not now, when will this little tidbit or nugget or piece of wisdom that Peter shared with me apply. And so it isn't lost on me, even if it isn't applicable in the moment. In the future, it usually is. So I really encourage people to get help with strategy and to really open yourselves up to options and trade offs, as long as, again, you're doing them consciously and with sort of a calculation of risk and reward instead of being reactive and
Well
emotional.
said. Let's pivot for a minute because you've been a coach, you've been a consultant, but you developed, I guess it was a few months ago, towards the beginning of the year, and started to roll out the assessment tool. Tell me what that was like to take content that's in your head, right, and turn it into a tool that actually measures something. So you had to conceptualize it, and most importantly, you actually executed it, which was awesome. But walk us through what it takes to do that and the value you got from that.
A lot of bravery, especially if, let's talk about mechanics first for a few seconds. So the mechanics are important, the math and the method and the approach, and doing a beta test. Will this thing actually work? Will people actually take it? Will you get decent analysis and trend data out of it, even in beta? So, really thinking through how to get people to take, in this case, a quiz, and keeping it short and sweet. 5 questions, 5 possible answers, under 5 minutes, boom, you get results, and it's free. Moving toward a subscription service and freemium type model. And I had come out of advisory services world, especially in the intelligence and data analytics benchmarking type companies. And so I was pretty familiar with subscription service and freemium, but I had never thought about it in terms of something that was as personal as it was professional. So it was a little bit loaded with some fear around, will people think I'm a freak? Will they want to take it? Will it resonate? So that was actually harder than the method and the math for me. I can imagine others more bold are probably like, screw it, this is what I'm doing, it's my life's work, people are going to get it. And then they may struggle with the math, the method, and sort of ensuring that it's sound on the back end. But I don't know anyone that probably is like, yeah, I've got this across all of it, because it's multifaceted.
Right. So talk about what it is your assessment measures, and then what people have taken it, and what you've learned in the process, and what people learn when they take the assessment, because it's gotten great feedback.
Oh, thank you. Great question. So, what it measures is where you want to spend the most time, both on what you're currently doing, just an as is measure of the time you're spending in these 5 areas: family, friends, career, society or community, and vitality, which is health and wellness. We have cute, kind of cool names for each of these 5 facets of your life gem. However, that's really what they are. And we've done a lot of research. And so far, thank goodness, knock on wood, most of the beta testers, and now that it's live, the new people taking the quiz have validated, yeah, those are the right 5. life areas, and they're encompassing for everyone universally, regardless of age or demographic or culture. So that was super important and helpful. I wanted it to be universal.
Well, that's a big deal because, so let me just pause there. That's a huge deal because oftentimes you come out with a hypothesis in an assessment. These are the five and blah, blah, blah. And it comes back and it's like, actually, there's four. Like numbers one and four are sort of the same. People don't understand the difference. Let's try it again. And it's not unusual for that to take multiple cycles until you have separate and distinct things that you're measuring, different dimensions. But you hit it on the first one, which is pretty cool.
Well, I had help, you included. So, I mean, I think there was a lot of sort of alpha testing, if you will, amongst a bunch of smart and really interested parties that are forever in my gratitude circle of life, including you and some former people I've worked with and some data analyst, sort of almost like big data type people that I called on for help. And so again, like doing the work up front for me paid the dividend. I'll tell you one just quick second story. We had socialite as the naming of the friend circle, and that came back really negative. And now it's called social, which people really loved. So go
Okay.
figure.
Well, words matter. Okay, so we've got the
They do.
it's working, we're measuring, and then ultimately, the plan is to layer on top of that various learning interventions so people can change their scores. In your case, there's not the best score, right? It's about changing the scores based on where you see yourself in balance and not in balance and out of whack and such.
Exactly. And another thing you and I had, talked about a lot, which was critical, and now I use it when I'm giving public talks as well, is that everything is situational and relative. So I don't know anyone at any age or any, walk of life or culture coming from, or even mentality or how you were brought up, that wouldn't agree that when there's big life changes, you have a baby, you get divorced, you change jobs, you move across the country, you buy a home, any of these level one big life changes, there's going to be a need to make a new conscious choice around where you're spending time and what you're deriving in joy and fulfillment from your current state and then your desired quality of life state. So the quiz is a way to support yourself along that journey, especially when it's a big life change. And the results of that are becoming really clear, not only in the trends and the stats, but in the comments people are making, which really blow me away that people are so willing to share their story.
Which is great. So now we've got the content. It's getting codified in a book. We've put it out in an assessment tool that's being validated, creating learning pieces. Talk a little bit about the speaking side, because what's interesting about this conversation is we're showing the different modalities, right, and ways that you deploy the content. It all comes from the same DNA, but there's different deployment modalities and situations. So, how do you talk about stop settling, for example, in a keynote situation or a workshop situation?
So even in beta, I was testing it out that way. I, for example, gave a talk to a hospital in Virginia. There were about 250 employees. The CEO brought me in, and it was in the beta. So I was really upfront, and I said, "Look, this thing's not live yet. I would love to get a live audience to take the quiz." We did it on dun 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 paper. They weren't very electronic, and they didn't have great connectivity, and it was every worker in this big hospital. So it was so cool to see people from different cultures and backgrounds and positions coming together to take this quiz. And then we did a pulse check on the quiz. I walked them through the method, of course, the method, and to the madness, like what does it mean, how do you apply it, and really try to make it crystal clear so they could take it with knowledge as to what it was measuring. And then they talked about it at their workshop tables. We had about 25 tables. And I would walk around and have dialogue and conversations with people and do some on the fly coaching. For example, one person was so surprised. She said, "I had no idea my vitality was so low. I've given up so much for my family and my career. There's nothing left for me. And I really want to work out." And one of the nurses said to her, "Well, we have yoga here like 4 days a week. You never show up. Would you try it?" And she goes, "I used to do yoga 20 years ago. I would show up. And I said, okay, now it's time for commitment. Who's willing to actually make a commitment and team up and hold one another accountable? And they sent me a note a couple months later. They were so sweet. And they're like, oh my God, Shirley's doing yoga 3 days a week. She loves it. She's got vitality back. She had to pull a little bit of time, in particular from career, but that particular hospital was so supportive. They want her healthy. It's a hospital, for goodness sakes.
Well, and just because she's spending less time doesn't mean that the time that she's there isn't better time for them, right? So it's not just it's the wrong measurement, right? Is she a better, more productive leader, employee, etc.? The fact that she might be spending a little bit less time there really is the wrong metric, and I think that's a big aha for people, right? It's not.
Exactly. And I've spent 20 years in staffing and recruitment and human capital. And what I'll tell you is recruiting and retention in particular, is not an easy measure. And most companies do a terrible job measuring retention, let alone building programmatic changes that will continue to retain key employees. And obviously, health and wellness and self care has to be part of that equation, or you're not going to look good on Glassdoor and, they were just bought. So look out there.
Yeah, exactly. This has been great. You are in the midst of the journey, and you've gotten some things behind you, and there's many more things ahead of you in this because you're sort of relatively new into this arena of thought leadership and all that. What are maybe one or two things that you did that you would tell someone not to do, and something that you would suggest someone do if they're considering going down this fun and exciting path that you're going down?
I guess the number one thing I've learned is, I'll start with the latter and go to the former. Get help. Two heads are always better than one. And particularly, Peter, you've been invaluable to me as a strategist and to get me out of my own way. And frankly, I got stuck along the way. And maybe this is the answer to the former, sort of thinking, overthinking, and then rethinking and overthinking. It was like an endless loop of why things might not work or how things may or may not be perceived. And you kind of got right into it and got me out of overthinking it and into what was much more salient and clear, which is critical to get the confidence to go forward and really just be willing and open to iterate along the path. So I really thank you for that. And I encourage your listeners to be willing to take some risks and to iterate, because it's not a one and done. It's just something that has to evolve.
Okay, so there's been lots and lots of information going back and forth here in terms of your assessment, your book journey, the speaking, the developing the platform, purpose, mission, and movement. First off, where can people take that assessment, and more importantly, where can they get in touch with you if they choose to?
Sure. Phoenix Fifth with the number 5th is my website. And they can also email me answers@phoenix5th.com. And they can take the quiz right on my website. There's also a nice little mobile treatment for it, so you can get it off your phone. So you can find everything at Phoenix with the number 5th.com.
Awesome, and the assessment is free. You'll get your customized report fairly quickly, and it's a great tool. It's an excellent
Oh,
example
thank you.
of an assessment. So, I thank you
Thank
for
you.
spending the time with us today and sharing your journey. And I think there's going to be a part two of this one in a couple months, or maybe more than a couple months, once we're further along in the book process and sort of continuing to check in and see how it's going and what you're learning and progress that you're making. But I appreciate your time and your candor today. Thank you so much, Dana.
Thank you, and best of success to everyone who's listening, and yourself, Peter.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.